Firm. We've been trying for 3 years. Every time we get close, something happens. Someone finds out. Someone dies. The conspiracy is too deeply embedded to attack directly. Then we attack indirectly. How? Min Jae was quiet for a moment, his tactical mind working through possibilities. The tattoo on his wrist seemed to pulse as his hand tightened. Okonkwo, he said finally. He came to the bakery today, which means he knows I'm involved now. He's going to be cautious, but he's also going to be curious. I'm an unknown variable in his equation, and unknown variables create opportunities for manipulation. If I can make him believe I'm not a threat, better yet, if I can make him believe I might be useful, he might let his guard down enough to reveal his connections. You want to get close to him, Amina said flatly, to the man who might have ordered your brother's death. I want to destroy him, but first, I need to understand him, his network, his vulnerabilities, his masters, because a man like Okonkwo is always working for someone bigger. Agnes leaned forward, her eyes sharp. You sound like your brother. He had that same cold calculation, that same willingness to use himself as bait. Is that how he died? That's how he got close enough to gather the evidence. The death came later, when they realized what he was doing. Min Jae absorbed this. His brother, the brother he had never known, had spent years fighting the same fight that now fell to him, had gathered evidence, made sacrifices, planned for every contingency, including contingency that he might not survive. The children, Min Jae said, Folake, Deo, Cheetah the real target. Everything else, Amina, the bakery, the pregnancy announcement, it's all designed to draw attention away from them. Yes, Amina said, then we need to move them, somewhere truly safe, somewhere even Okonkwo can't reach. Where? Min Jae was silent for a moment. Then, so, my compound there has security that rivals a military installation. And in Korea, I control the playing field. Okonkwo's influence ends at the airport. How do we get them there? Their faces will be flagged. Okonkwo has contacts at immigration. Leave that to me. Min Jae rose, his decision made. I have a private jet, private airstrip, and enough lawyers to make anyone's head spin. Getting 3 children out of Lagos without a paper trail is child's play compared to some of the deals I've done. Amina looked at him. This man she had raised, who had become a stranger, who was now transforming into something she recognized. A protector, a fighter, a son. You're really going to do this, she said. Risk everything. Your company, your reputation, your life. For children you didn't know existed until yesterday. Min Jae looked at her steadily. Their family, he said. You taught me what that means. Amina's eyes filled with tears for what seemed like the 100th time since he had walked back into her life. I taught you many things, she whispered. But I don't think I taught you that. No, you showed me. Every day for 14 years. You showed me that family isn't about blood. It's about choice. About sacrifice. About showing up when it matters. He paused. You showed up for those children when no one else would. Now it's my turn to show up for all of you. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of logistics and deception. Min Jae returned to his official role, meetings, negotiations, the endless machinery of empire, while simultaneously orchestrating an operation that would have impressed military strategists. He couldn't remove the children from Lagos directly. Too many eyes, too many questions. Instead, he would need to create a distraction, a cover story, a reason for 3 children to suddenly disappear from a bakery in Yaba. The solution came from an unexpected source, Folake herself. I want to enter a baking competition, she announced on the second day, standing in the bakery with her arms crossed and her chin raised in an expression that reminded Min Jae unervingly of himself. A competition? Amina looked bewildered. In Korea, I saw an advertisement on the television. An international children's baking competition sponsored by... She looked at Min Jae significantly. The Kong Foundation. Min Jae stared at her. There is no international children's baking competition sponsored by the Kong Foundation, he said slowly. Not yet, Folake agreed. But there could be. By next week, if someone made a few phone calls, he continued staring. This 7-year-old was suggesting he create an entire fictional event as a cover story for their extraction. It was brilliant. She's terrifying, he told Amina. I know, Amina said with something like pride. She gets it from her father. The Khan Foundation International Youth Baking Competition was announced 3 days later, a last-minute addition to the foundation's charitable calendar, designed to promote cultural exchange and celebrate young culinary talent. The grand prize was a full scholarship to a prestigious culinary academy. Entrants from across Africa were encouraged to apply. 3 Nigerian children, coincidentally the adopted grandchildren of a local bakery owner, were selected as finalists. They would travel to Seoul for the final round, accompanied by their guardian. It was, on paper, completely innocent. Okonkwo was suspicious. Min Jae could see it in the man's eyes when he appeared at the bakery again, offering congratulations on the children's selection with a smile that didn't reach his gaze. But he couldn't prove anything, and he couldn't move against them publicly, not with international media covering the competition. You've thought of everything, Amina said the night before their departure, watching Min Jae review security arrangements on his phone. Almost everything. We're still vulnerable during transit. The airport, the flight, the arrival in Seoul. If Okonkwo has resources in Korea, he does. Min Jae looked up sharply. How do you know? Because your uncle did. Park Sang-joon had contacts throughout Asia. When he died, someone inherited that network. Okonkwo or someone above him. Someone above him, Min Jae repeated. You keep implying that. Who do you think he reports to? Amina was quiet for a moment. Then, I think there's someone in your company. Someone who's been watching, waiting, manipulating things from the inside for years. Someone who knew about Taejun, knew about the evidence, knew about everything, and has been systematically ensuring that the truth stays buried. Min Jae felt cold. That's a significant accusation. I've had 12 years to think about it. 12 years to watch patterns, to notice coincidences. Someone close to your family has been feeding information to the other side. That's the only explanation for how they've stayed one step ahead for so long. Do you have any idea who? No, but they'll reveal themselves eventually. They always do. She met his eyes. You need to be careful, Min Jae. You're walking into a snake pit, and you don't know which snakes are poisonous. I know one thing, he said quietly. What? I know you're not one of them. I know that now with absolute certainty. Whatever else happens, I know that. Amina's eyes filled with tears, but for the first time, they looked like tears of relief rather than grief. It took you long enough to figure that out, she said with a watery smile. I'm a slow learner. You always said so. I said you were stubborn. There's a difference. Is there? She laughed. A real laugh. The first he had heard from her since their reunion. And for just a moment, it was like no time had passed at all. Like they were back in the kitchen of the Adekunle mansion. Him pretending not to need the extra portion she slipped onto his plate. Her pretending not to notice that he noticed. We should sleep? Amina said finally. Tomorrow will be long. You sleep? I have more arrangements to make. She hesitated, then placed a hand on his cheek. The same gesture she made 1,000 times when he was young, checking for fever, for tears, for evidence of the emotions he tried so hard to hide. My son, she said softly, my impossible, stubborn, brilliant son. Don't forget to take care of yourself while you're taking care of everyone else. I never forget anything, he said. You taught me that too. I taught you too many things. It's made you insufferable. But she was smiling as she said it. And when she walked away to check on the sleeping children, Min Jae felt something in his chest that he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. The morning of the departure dawned gray and humid. Lagos wrapped in particular haze that preceded the rainy season. Min Jae had been awake for hours, coordinating with the security team, reviewing contingencies, ensuring that every detail was in place. The children were excited. Even Folake, who was better at hiding it. They had never been on an airplane before, never left Nigeria. The prospect of travel, of adventure, of the fictional baking competition was enough to temporarily eclipse the fear that had become their constant companion. Remember, Amina told them as they prepared to leave, whatever happens, stay close to each other. Stay close to me or to Min-jae. And if someone you don't recognize tells you to go with them, you run and scream. Deo recited, "We know, Grandma. You've told us 100 times. I'll tell you 100 more. Now come." The car is waiting. The ride to the airport was tense. Despite Min-jae's security escort, every motorcycle that passed too close, every car that lingered too long behind them, triggered a spike of adrenaline. But they reached Murtala Muhammad Airport without incident, and the private terminal that Min-jae had arranged was blessedly empty. No public check-in, he explained as they were escorted through discreet corridors. No immigration lines. We'll clear formalities on the plane. Is this what being rich is like? Deo asked, eyes wide. This is what being paranoid is like. Min-jae said, the money just makes the paranoia more comfortable. They boarded the jet, a sleek Gulfstream G650 that served as Min-jae's mobile office, and the children immediately began exploring with the enthusiasm of young puppies. She discovered the snack cabinet and declared it the greatest thing she had ever seen. Deo found the entertainment system and began scrolling through movies with religious intensity. Even Folake's composure cracked slightly as she ran her hands over the leather seats and whispered, "This is very nice." "Strap in," Min-jae instructed. "We'll take off in 20 minutes. He stepped into the cockpit to speak with the pilots, leaving Amina to get the children settled. When he returned, she was sitting by the window, staring out at the tarmac with an expression he couldn't read. "What is it?" he asked, taking the seat across from her. "It's just, this is real. After 12 years of running, hiding, surviving, it's actually happening. We're actually leaving. We're not safe yet. I know, but we're moving towards safety, and that's more than I've had in a very long time." Min-jae was about to respond when his phone buzzed. A message from Jun-ho, who was handling things on the ground. Unusual activity at the main terminal. Several men asking questions about children traveling internationally. They have badges that look official but don't match any agency I recognize. Advise immediate departure. Min-jae's blood ran cold. He was out of his seat instantly, striding toward the cockpit. "We need to leave now," he told the pilot. "Expedite takeoff clearance." "Sir, we haven't completed." Now star. Something in his voice must have conveyed the urgency, because the pilot immediately began running through an abbreviated checklist, contacting the tower with a priority request. Min-jae returned to the cabin, keeping his expression neutral for the children's benefit. "We're leaving a few minutes early," he said lightly. "Everyone buckled in?" Amina met his eyes, reading the truth beneath his calm. Her hand found Folake's and squeezed. "We're ready," she said. The jet began to move, taxiing toward the runway. Min-jae watched through the window as the terminal building slid past, searching for any sign of pursuit. There, on the edge of the tarmac, a black SUV, parked where it shouldn't be, two figures emerging, moving toward the runway with the deliberate pace of men who expected to be obeyed. They were too late. The jet accelerated, the roar of engines drowning out everything else. Min-jae felt the liftoff, that stomach-dropping moment when the wheels left the ground and Lagos dropped away beneath them. They were in the air. They were gone. But even as relief washed through him, Min-jae knew this was just the beginning. Getting out of Lagos was one thing. Staying safe in Seoul, uncovering the truth, bringing down the conspiracy that had destroyed so many lives. That was another battle entirely. He looked across the cabin at Amina, who was holding Chi on her lap, murmuring comfort as the little girl's ears adjusted to the altitude change. Beyond her, Folake sat with her nose pressed to the window, watching Africa fall away below. These people, this strange, assembled family of blood and choice, were now his responsibility, his to protect, his to fight for. 12 years ago, he had lost a woman who raised him and spent more than a decade consumed by a false story of betrayal. Now he had found her again, along with brother's legacy. 3 children who carried the future in their memories, and a conspiracy that stretched across continents and decades. The old Min-jae would have approached this as a business problem, cold, calculated, transactional. But the old Min Jae had never understood what Amina had tried to teach him all those years ago. That some fights weren't about winning. They were about love. The Seoul compound occupied an entire hillside in Pyeongchang-dong, one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the capital. Behind its walls and security systems, the property sprawled across acres of carefully maintained grounds, traditional Korean architecture blending with modern security infrastructure in a way that managed to be both beautiful and intimidating. The children were overwhelmed. "This is your house?" Deo asked as they passed through the gates, his voice reaching a pitch that only dogs and small children could achieve. One of them, Min Jae said, which did not help matters. The household staff was waiting in the entrance courtyard. 20 people who managed everything from cooking to gardening to the subtle security measures that kept the compound impenetrable. They bowed as Min Jae approached, their expressions professionally neutral, but he saw curiosity flickering in more than a few eyes. Their chairman had returned from Lagos with an elderly Nigerian woman and 3 children. The gossip would be epic. Mrs. Park. Min Jae addressed the head of household, a formidable woman who had managed the properties for 15 years. "Our guests will be staying in the East Wing. Full access to all facilities. Their safety is the highest priority. I want security doubled, and I want no one entering or leaving the compound without my personal authorization." "Understood, sir." Mrs. Park's eyes flicked to Amina, assessing her with particular intensity of someone who ran a household for a living. "Welcome to Seoul, Mrs. Balogun. I hope you'll find everything to your satisfaction." "Thank you," Amina said gracefully, but Min Jae saw her take in surroundings with barely concealed astonishment. This was a far cry from the compound behind her bakery. The first few days were dedicated to settling in. The children needed time to adjust. New country, new language, new everything, and Amina needed rest. Real rest, for the first time in years, in a place where she didn't have to watch every shadow. Min Jae threw himself into investigation. He started with his own company. The AfroKorean Corporation was a sprawling entity, with divisions spanning real estate development, financial services, technology investment, and charitable foundations. Thousands of employees, dozens of executives, billions of dollars flowing through accounts across 6 continents. Somewhere in this labyrinth was a traitor, someone who had been feeding information to the conspiracy for years, perhaps decades. Someone who might even predate Min Jae's own leadership. He began with personnel files, looking for anomalies, employees who had unusual access, executives who had connections to Park Sang-joon, anyone who might have been in a position to know about Tae-jun's survival and the evidence he had gathered. The search was tedious, frustrating, and seemingly endless. But on the 4th day, he found something. A name. Lee Hyo-jin, Chief Financial Officer of AfroKorean's Asian operations. A woman who had been with the company for 28 years, longer than Min Jae had been alive. A trusted executive who had survived multiple leadership transitions, including the brutal succession battle after his father's death. A woman who had also, according to financial records buried deep in archive databases, received monthly payments from an offshore account connected to Park Sang-joon. The payments had started 18 years ago. They had never stopped. Min Jae confronted Amina that evening, as the children played in the garden under the watchful eyes of security personnel. "Lee Hyo-jin," he said, "did you ever interact with her? During your time in the household?" Amina frowned, searching her memory. "The accountant? I remember her. She came to the house sometimes, for meetings with your father. She was always watchful, never spoke to the servants if she could avoid it. But why? She's been receiving payments from an account connected to my uncle for nearly 2 decades. Amina's face went pale. "She's the insider. It seems likely, but I need proof, and I need to understand the full scope of her involvement before I move against her." "How will you get it?" "The Seoul Bank, the one where Tae-jun deposited his evidence." Min Jae's expression hardened. Lee Hyo-jin would have been CFO when that bank was acquired. She would have overseen the transfer of assets, including safety deposit boxes. If the evidence is truly inaccessible, she might be the reason why. You think she destroyed it? I think she tried. But Tae-jun was clever. You've said so yourself. He would have anticipated interference, created redundancies, Backup plans. The access code. Amina breathed. The one folate memorized. It's not just for the safety deposit box. It's for something else. Something that Lee Hyo-jin couldn't find because she didn't know what she was looking for. Min Jae nodded slowly. We need to talk to Folake. Find out exactly what her father told her. They found the girl in the library, a vast room filled with books in Korean, English, and several other languages. Folake had discovered the section on detective fiction and was working her way through a Korean translation of Sherlock Holmes. I need to ask you something important, Min Jae said, sitting down across from her. About your father. About what he told you before he died. Folake set down her book carefully. Her eyes were old, serious, full of the weight that no 7-year-old should carry. Grandma said this would happen, she said. She said someone would come asking the right questions eventually. I'm asking now, what did your father tell you? Folake was quiet for a long moment. Then, he said I was special, that I had to remember something very important. Numbers and words that didn't make sense to me, but would make sense to the right person someday. She recited carefully. Echo 7 Delta 442. The phoenix rises when the dragon sleeps. Asked the grandmother about the second key. Min Jae felt his blood chill. The phoenix rises when the dragon sleeps. The phoenix was on his tattoo. The Korean phoenix. Symbol of rebirth and power. Combined with the Nsibiti symbols that represented his Atakanal heritage. His father had often been called the dragon in business circles. A fearsome, volatile presence that demanded respect and inspired fear. Asked the grandmother about the second key. He turned to Amina. Second key, he said. What does that mean? Amina's face had gone completely white. Oh, she whispered. Oh, Taejun, you brilliant, impossible boy. Amina, what is it? She looked at him with eyes full of wonder and grief and something that might have been triumph. I have the second key, she said. I've had it for 12 years. Your brother gave it to me before I left Korea. Told me to keep it safe. Never tell anyone. Wait for the right moment. She laughed, a sound equal parts joy and disbelief. I thought it was a memento, a keepsake. I've been carrying it in my luggage this entire time without knowing what it unlocked. She rose abruptly and left the room. When she returned, she was holding a small brass key, unremarkable in every way. The kind of key that might open a music box or a diary. This, she said, placing it in Min Jae's palm. This is what he died to protect. And now, finally we can use it. Min Jae stared at the key in his palm. So small, so ordinary, holding the weight of decades of secrets and death. Echo 7 Delta 442. The code that Folake had memorized. The phoenix rises when the dragon sleeps. The message only he could understand. And now, the second key, the physical piece that would unlock whatever his brother had died to protect. He looked up at Amina, at Folake, at the library that surrounded them with thousands of books and none of the answers they truly needed. We have the code, he said slowly. We have the key, but we still don't know where. Yes, we do, Amina said quietly. That's what I never told you. What I never told anyone. Min Jae's heart stopped. What? Amina's eyes filled with tears, but these weren't tears of grief or relief. These were tears of fear. The evidence, she whispered, isn't in soul. It never was. She reached out, touched the tattoo visible at his wrist. The phoenix and Nsibiti symbols that had been inked into his skin more than 20 years ago. It's been hidden, she said, in the one place no one would ever think to look. The one place your brother Mina's fingers lingered on the tattoo. The phoenix intertwined with Nsibiti symbols. The ink faded slightly by time, but still vivid against Min Jae's skin. It's been hidden, she repeated, her voice barely audible. In the one place no one would ever think to look. The one place your brother knew would survive everything. Every raid, every investigation, every betrayal. Min Jae's breath came slowly. Tell me, the original Atakanal family compound, in Abeokuta, the house where your mother first met Emeka, the house where Taejun was conceived. Amina withdrew her hand, wrapping her arms around herself as if cold despite the warmth of the sole evening. Your brother went back there years before he died. He told me he was visiting relatives. But now I understand he was planning something, burying it where only someone with the code, the key, and the knowledge of the family's history could find it. Abiokua, Min-jae repeated. The name tasted unfamiliar on his tongue. He knew the city by reputation, an ancient Yoruba settlement, the underneath the rocks city, 2 hours north of Lagos. But he had never been there, had never known it mattered. The compound still exists, he asked. It exists, but barely. The family scattered years ago, some to Lagos, some abroad. The house has been maintained by a caretaker, an old man named Baba Tunji, who has worked for the Adekono family since before I was born. He's the only one who would know where Taejun went during his visits. Then we need to go to Abeokuta. We need to go back to Nigeria. Amina corrected, and the weight of the words settled over them both. Back to Nigeria. Back to Lagos. Back within reach of Okonkwo and whoever else was hunting them. They had barely escaped once. Folake, who had been sitting perfectly still throughout this exchange, absorbing every word with the supernatural attention of a child who had learned that adult conversations could mean the difference between safety and danger, spoke up. I'll go with you, she said. No, Min-jae and Amina said simultaneously. I have the code. I memorized it. Papa gave it to me, not anyone else. What if there are things at the compound that only I would recognize? Things that connect to other things Papa told me. Stories I thought were just stories. Min-jae looked at the girl, this impossibly brave, impossibly wise 7-year-old who carried an empire's secrets in her memory, and felt something crack inside him, not his resolve. Something deeper, something that had been frozen for years and was now painfully thawing. She has a point, he said quietly. She's 7 years old. Amina protested. She's also the only person alive who received instructions directly from Taejun. If the evidence is coded, layered, designed to be found only by someone who knew him, then it should be found by his daughter. Folake's voice was steady. That's what he wanted. That's why he told me, and not anyone else. Because he knew I would remember, and he knew I would be brave enough. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of impossible choices. Amina looked at Min-jae. He saw the war in her eyes, the grandmother's instinct to protect fighting against the strategist's recognition that the girl was right. I'll keep her safe, Min-jae said. I swear it on everything I am. You can't promise that. I can promise that anyone who tries to hurt her will have to go through me first. And I am not easy to go through. Amina studied his face for a long time. Then she turned to Folake. If we do this, she said, you stay close. You do exactly what Min-jae and I tell you. No arguments, no independence, no detective work. Agreed. Agreed, Folake said solemnly. And Deo and Chi, they stay here, Min-jae said. Mrs. Park will care for them. The compound security is the best in Asia. They'll be safe. Amina nodded slowly, then looked at him with an expression he would remember for the rest of his life. Trust? Fear, love, and particular desperation of a woman who was betting everything she had left on a man she had once abandoned. When do we leave? She asked. Tomorrow night. Private flight. Different route. We'll go through Abidjan, then overland to Abeokuta. Avoid Lagos entirely. And Okonkwo? Leave Okonkwo to me. I have something planned for him. Before they could return to Nigeria, Min-jae had another problem to address. Lee Hyo-jin. The CFO had been with Adekono for 28 years, a fixture of the company's leadership, trusted with financial oversight of operations worth billions. She was efficient, meticulous, and universally respected by the board. She was also, if Min-jae's evidence was correct, a traitor who had been feeding information to the conspiracy for nearly 2 decades. He couldn't confront her directly. Not yet. A premature accusation would give her time to destroy evidence, alert her handlers, and potentially endanger the mission to Abeokuta. Instead, he needed to neutralize her quietly, cut off her access to information without revealing that she had been exposed. He called a board meeting. The conference room at Adekono Seoul headquarters occupied the entire 42nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city, a long table of polished Korean elm, and chairs that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Min-jae arrived first, as always. He stood at the window, looking out over the city that his family had helped build, the tattoo on his wrist visible beneath the cuff of his dark suit as he held a tablet displaying financial records. The executives filed in over the next 10 minutes. Vice presidents, directors, department heads, the inner circle of a corporate empire. They took their seats with the practiced efficiency of people who understood that their chairman's time was not to be wasted. Lee Hyo-jin entered last. She was 63, elegant in the way of Korean professional women who had survived decades in a male-dominated business world. Her hair was cut in precise silver bob, her suit immaculate, her posture flawless. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew where all the bodies were buried. Literally, Min Jae thought. "Good morning," he said, turning from the window. His voice was its usual controlled monotone, giving nothing, revealing nothing. "Thank you for convening on short notice." He outlined a corporate restructuring plan he had spent the previous night developing, a plan that was, on its surface, a routine efficiency measure. Divisions would be reorganized. Reporting structures would change. Certain executives would be given new responsibilities. The key change was buried deep in proposal. The CFO's direct access to operational data across all divisions would be replaced by a distributed model, with financial oversight shared among 3 deputy controllers. It was, in corporate terms, a demotion disguised as a promotion. Lee Hyo-jin recognized it instantly. He could see it in the microscopic tightening around her eyes, the fractional pause before she lifted her pen to make notes. "Chairman," she said, her voice professionally neutral, "this restructuring seems quite comprehensive. Perhaps we should discuss the financial implications before." "The financial implications have been analyzed," Min Jae said. He held her gaze, letting her see nothing but the flat, controlled surface that had made him feared in boardrooms across 3 continents. "The restructuring takes effect Monday. But Monday, Ms. Lee, please prepare the transition documents." Their eyes held for a moment too long. He saw the calculation behind